Welcome everyone. If you want to use the translation device, the number, it's set on channel 2, which is for English, and for channel 10 is for Korean. So you can set your devices as you'd like. So good morning. I'd like to welcome you to CSIS. I am not Dr. Hamry, as you can tell. Dr. Hamry is the CEO of CSIS, has been so for many years. Unfortunately, he had an action last night, so he cannot be here, and he is, this is an event that is very close to his heart, and he sends his sincere regrets that he's not able to be here. But you know, the CSIS relationship with DAPA is one that it goes back for a decade plus, and it's really, really important to Dr. Hamry and to CSIS in general. So it's really an honor to have representatives from DAPA as well as from other parts of the Korean government and from industry as well, because it's just a central part of what CSIS does. We have our Korea chair that focuses on that bilateral relationship and activities in that part of Asia. So it is very central to our work overall at CSIS, and we are honored to do many activities and events around the U.S.-Korean relationship. And this is our annual conference that we have with DAPA, and we're great to be here. Now, who am I? So I am Dr. Jerry McGinn, and I am the director of the Center for the Industrial Base. And you're asking yourself, what the heck is that? That is a new organization within the Center for Strategic International Studies, and that builds off the prior work of the Defense Industries Initiatives Group. And so the Center for the Industrial Base is focusing on reimagining how we cooperate both with our, within the United States and with our U.S. international partners on industrial base matters. So it's important for government, for industry, and one of the key aspects of the work that we're going to be doing for the Center for the Industrial Base is on international industrial collaboration. And you know, this is a hallmark example of that, the U.S.-Korean partnership. And so we look forward to the discussions today. And we have a really tremendous crowd here. But more importantly, we've got, not more importantly, but more importantly than me, are the speakers that we're going to have for you today. But first I'd like to introduce Dr. Yang Onbang, who's the president of Jeonbuk National University. He is the 19th president of JBNU, and he has a distinguished career for nearly 3 decades. He has a degree from engineering in the Korea University and a master's and PhD in similar studies. And he's worked at the U.S. National Renewable Energy Lab and done a postdoc here at University of California, Davis. Beyond his role as university president, he's been a central figure in shaping Korea's educational innovation policies. He serves as chairman of the Korean Council for University Education and co-chairman for both the Council of University Presidents and for the Advancement of Medical Colleges. And his influence extends to key national bodies as well. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Dr. Yang to give some celebratory remarks.
Thank you, Jerry. 안녕하십니까? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests. I am Obong Yang, who is the president of Jeonbuk National University, as he suggests me, and I currently serve in 3 minister-level positions as the chairman of the University Education Council, representing 197 4-year universities in Korea, and as a member of the National Education Commission on the Presidential Office, too. It is a great honor and privilege to join you today at the 2025 DAPA CSIS Defense Corporation Conference, co-hosted by Korea's Defense Acquisition Program Administration and the Center for Strategic and International Studies of the United States. First of all, I'd like to extend my deepest gratitude to Dr. John Harris, President of CSI, not today here, and the DAPA Commissioner, Sok Jong-gun, for their dedicated effort in preparing this important event. I also wish to express my sincere appreciation to former U.S. Ambassador to Korea, Harry Harris, and Deputy Assistant Secretary Michael Baccaro of the U.S. Department of State for graciously joining us despite their busy schedules. Furthermore, I believe this conference has become all the more meaningful thanks to the presence of distinguished guests from both Korea and the United States who have honored us with their participation today at the Korea-U.S. Summit held on August 25th. Our two presidents reaffirmed their commitment to strengthen a future-oriented, comprehensive strategic alliance. In particular, the agreement on MASCA cooperation represents a significant foundation for elevating our bilateral defense partnership into a true third generation of U.S. ROK defense cooperation, moving beyond arms purchase and technologies transfers toward joint development cooperation and global market entry. At the time when the importance of Korea-U.S. defense cooperation is more critical than ever, today's conference is both timely and meaningful. I expect that the discussion here will generate practical alternative for advancing bilateral defense cooperation, whether in MASCA, advanced technologies, or supply chain resilience to an entirely new level. Jeonbuk National University has also been striving to become Korea's leading hub for cultivating defense talent in line with this global trend. Since 2023, we have operated the Defense Industry Convergence Program and the Institute for Defense Industry. Over the past 3 years, we have signed MOUs with more than 20 major institutions and companies, including DAPA and Hana Aerospace and the other companies, being designated as an authorized university for the Defense Project Manager Certification Program, launched the contract-based master's program in advanced defense industry, and established the Hana Aerospace Hub specialized research center on our campus. Looking ahead, Jeonbuk National University will launch Korea's first undergraduate program in advanced defense industry studies in early 2026. In addition, we are preparing to establish a graduate school of defense industry convergence and the global online master's program in defense acquisition, so-called MTA, not MBA. Through these initiatives, our university will continue to grow as a true hub for educating global defense leaders. As president of Jeonbuk National University and chair of the Korean Council for University Education, I'd like to present two proposals today to further advance Korea-U.S. defense cooperation. First, strengthen research collaboration. Beginning with Moscow Naval Cooperation, our defense partnership must expand into advanced technologies and major weapon systems involving into third generation cooperation through joint development, co-production, and global market entry. To this end, DAPA, CSIS, our university should pursue close research collaboration. Jeonbuk National University, together with DAPA and CSIS, will further promote studies on advanced technology, defense policy, and supply chains. In particular, through collaboration between our Institute for Defense Industry Studies and the CSI Defense Industrial Initiative groups, we hope to serve as a bridge for bilateral policy, research, and educational cooperation. By jointly planning and researching the future direction of the defense industry and by linking key outcomes to policy, I am confident that we can accelerate the realization of third generation defense cooperation. Second, cooperation in education and talent development. The demand for talent in advanced defense field is directly tied to national security. Jeonbuk National University, centered on our Department of Advanced Defense Industry and the Institute for Defense Industry Studies, will operate global joint degree programs and training initiatives to teach the next generation of defense leaders. Moreover, at the Council for University Education, we will expand defense-related education nationwide in fields such as physical AI, drones, space, and cyber in partnership with other universities. Through close collaboration with DAPA and CSIS, we will actively develop and operate programs that meet the growing need of both our nations for advanced defense talent. Finally, to institutionalize this effort, I propose that DAPA, CSIS, and Jeonbuk National University jointly operate regular forum and working groups. By doing so, we can establish a virtuous cycle where policy, research, education, and talent development are organically concerned. Distinguished guests, once again, I wish to express my heartfelt gratitude to all of you for your presence today. Jeonbuk National University will continue to devote itself as Korea's hub for defense talent cultivation, contributing to the further advancement of bilateral defense cooperation. I sincerely wish for the success of today's conference and for it to become a milestone in opening a new chapter in Korea-U.S. defense cooperation. 같이 갑시다. Thank you very much. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yang. That was tremendous remarks. It's great to have you here. And there are several other representatives from the university, so it's great to be here. So now we're going to move into our keynote addresses, and we have two tremendous individuals to give those keynote addresses. And if you wanted to ask a question, there's a QR code in the back of the room. You can scan that and submit your questions. We'll have some time for questions and answers after the remarks. But we're honored to have two distinguished guests for our keynotes. First off, I'd like to introduce Admiral Harry Harris Jr. or Ambassador Harry Harris Jr., whichever you prefer. He was the commander of the Pacific Fleet, which is now Indo-Pacific Command, and then he retired from that role in 2018. And then he was the ambassador to Korea during the first Trump administration. So he's familiar to many of our guests that are here from Korea. He's a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy and served as a naval flight officer and conducted many operations in Operation Desert Storm, Southern Watch, Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, and the like. And he served in the Pentagon as well. He has over 4,400 flight hours, including 400 in combat. And then he's got a master's in public administration from the Harvard Kennedy JFK School of Government, and a master's degree from security studies from Georgetown University. Next to him, we have our minister from DAPA, the Defense Acquisition Program Administration, Suk Yong-gun. And he's responsible for overseeing DAPA's extensive portfolio of force improvement programs, procurement of military supplies, and promotion of the defense industry. He graduated from the Korean Military Academy and earned a master's degree in operations research at the Korean National Defense University. He served in infantry roles. Speaking as a former infantry officer, I appreciate that very much. Was a division commander, and then retired as a two-star, but the call to public service continued for him, and he's been a minister of DAPA since February of 2024. So I'd like to now turn to Minister. Would you like to go first for your remarks? Yeah. So we'll have the minister speak, and then Ambassador Admiral Harris, and then we'll go into questions and answers. So thank you.
Honorable Dr. Jerry Mackin, thank you for your warm welcome. President Yang Oh-bong, thank you as well for your congratulatory remarks. I would like to extend special thanks to retired Admiral Harry Harris, former U.S. Ambassador to the Republic of Korea, for delivering the keynote address despite his busy schedule. I am equally grateful to all the distinguished guests here today, to everyone who has worked hard to prepare this event, and to those joining us online. Since its inception in 2016, this conference, co-hosted by DAPA and CSIS, has become an important tradition in advancing defense industrial cooperation between the Republic of Korea and the United States. Especially for this year, as the importance of global security, supply chains, and technological competition is greater than ever. We gather under the theme of expanding ROK-U.S. defense industrial cooperation for advanced technology, partnerships, and supply chain resilience. I am confident that today's event will serve as a meaningful occasion to envision a future for our alliance. The ROK-U.S. alliance was born in the gunfire of the Korean War as a security alliance. Since then, the United States has been a steadfast partner in Korea's path to world industrialization and economic growth. And our relationships deepened into an economic alliance. At the recent summit this August, our two presidents pledged to strengthen cooperations across security, the economy, and the defense industry. Not long ago, President Lee Jae-myung also addressed here at CSIS, presenting a new principle of pragmatic diplomacy centered on the national interests. Within this broader framework of the security, economic alliance, and the pragmatic diplomacy, defense industry and the shipbuilding have emerged as new pillars of bilateral cooperation. In the defense industry, Korea has moved beyond its past reliance on the United States through independent technological innovation and the expansion of global exports. We have now established ourselves as a partner that advances together with the United States. In shipbuilding, leveraging our world-class construction and sustainment capabilities, Korea is emerging as a vital partner in achieving the United States' strategic goals of revitalizing its shipbuilding industry and strengthening naval power. In particular, our ongoing discussions on cooperation in ship construction and MRO under the MASCA project can be regarded as a representative case of building a cooperative model to realize our shared national interests in defense and shipbuilding. Going forward, collaboration in Korea's defense and shipbuilding industries will remain a central pillar that underpins the ROK-U.S. alliance, playing a key role in strengthening the security and economies of both countries and advancing our national interests. Today, we are facing a global security environment marked by greater uncertainty and rising threats than ever before. The war in Ukraine and the conflicts in the Middle East pose severe challenges to global security, while in the Indo-Pacific, North Korea's nuclear and missile threats and China's military expansion are heightening tensions in the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea. In this environment, global demand for defense products is rapidly increasing, and countries are steadily expanding defense spending as a share of GDP. However, the supply capacity of the defense industry has not kept pace with demand, making the establishment of stable and resilient supply chains an urgent task for the international community. The U.S. response to these challenges is the Regional Sustainment Framework. Through the RSF, the U.S. intends to disperse sustainment capacity to local facilities to ensure timely maintenance and resupply for weapon systems. It also aims to diversify production among multiple allied and partners, which was once reliant on certain regions or limited supplier. For RSF to succeed, cooperation with allies and partners possessing strong defense industrial capabilities is essential. No single country can meet our requirements alone. Therefore, industrial bases and technological strengths must be shared. This is where Korea's role stands out. In pursuit of peace on the Korean Peninsula, Korea has achieved remarkable advances in its defense industry. As a result, Korea now possesses broad production and sustainment capacity, not only for major platforms such as ships, aircraft, and tanks, but also for subsystems and critical components. Looking ahead, Korea will further deepen cooperation with the United States and its allies. We will expand collaboration beyond maintenance and resupply and include joint production, complementary industrial bases, and the establishment of MRO hubs, thereby making tangible contributions to peace and security in the Indo-Pacific region. The integration of advanced technologies into the battlefield is no longer a matter of the future. It is already the reality of today. AI now analyzes vast amounts of data in real time to support target identification and operational decision-making. Unmanned systems have served as core assets for reconnaissance and precision strikes in the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. Space capabilities through satellites and communications networks has become as the eyes and nervous system of command and control, reshaping the nature of warfare. For these reasons, the ROK and the U.S. must move beyond traditional arms sales and technology transfer and deep cooperation as a true technology alliance. This is not simply about acquiring new equipment. It's the way to secure both the military strength and the technological superiority of our alliance. For example, in the United States development of collaborative combat aircraft, Korea can contribute its strengths in airframe design, engines, avionics, unmanned control, and composite materials. In the field of unmanned surface vessels, collaboration is already underway. Combining the platform production capacity of Korean shipyards with American expertise in AI and mission autonomy systems. Together, the two countries will expand joint research and development and personnel exchanges, thereby building innovative combined forces that prepare for the future battlefield and maintain overwhelming superiority. Distinguished guests, today we will discuss the challenges and opportunities facing the ROK-U.S. alliance. Supply chain crisis, technological competition, and the rapidly changing dynamics of warfare are challenges that no single nation can overcome alone. Yet I am confident if Korea and the United States stand together, we can turn these challenges into opportunities and open a new future. The growing ROK-U.S. cooperation in shipbuilding and defense industry will go beyond the simple act of producing weapons. It will serve as the cornerstone of a strategic alliance that links security, economy, technology, and industry. At the recent ROK-U.S. summit, President Lee Jae-myung stated that if the United States becomes the peacemaker, then Korea will serve as the pacemaker and a company that passes to the very end. I believe this reflects a promise that our two countries will keep in step as we advance toward peace and prosperity. I hope that today's event will mark the starting point of that new leap forward. Once again, I thank all for joining us, and I wish for the enduring strength and prosperity of the ROK-U.S. alliance. Thank you.
Very, very powerful.
Wow, that was a tough act to follow, General. Terrific, powerful remarks. Thanks, Dr. McGinn, for that introduction, and good morning, everyone. I'm honored to be your keynote speaker today. Well, technically, I'm honored to be Plan B after your Plan A fell through, but I'm delighted to be here nonetheless. Let me also take a moment to acknowledge Dr. Hamre. I'm sorry that he couldn't be here today. I wish him a speedy recovery, and I'll just note that John Hamre would do anything not to have to listen to me give another speech. The Honorable Sok Jong-un, Minister of Defense Acquisition Program Administration, or DAPA, again, just wonderful remarks. Thank you. And Dr. Yang Oh-boon, President of John Buck National University, thank you for those inspiring congratulatory remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, my thanks to CSIS and DAPA for putting this event together. I commend Dr. Hamre and Minister Sok and your teams for the important work you're doing to inspire our defense, diplomatic, and industrial leaders, and for your constant vigilance on security matters. For my time as ambassador and in my current work, I've seen firsthand how important DAPA is in fostering Seoul's national defense industry, procuring the right military equipment for your own defense, and developing South Korea's impressive defense industrial base. Seoul's stated aspiration is to become the world's fourth largest weapons provider by 2027. And thanks to Minister Sok and DAPA, I believe you're well on your way to do that. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time in preamble. I want to finish this and get to your questions. So my job is to do the talking, and your job is to do the listening. If you finish your job before I finish mine, just raise your hands, and I'll stop right there. So let's get to it. I believe in 2025 that we are at an inflection point in history. We're certainly not near anything resembling the end of history. We're seeing tectonic shifts in the global world order. Freedom, justice, and the rules-based system hang in the balance. And the scale won't tip of its own accord simply because of wishful thinking. If we are to tip that scale in our favor, now more than ever, the U.S.-South Korea alliance matters. In fact, I believe that America's single greatest asymmetric strength is our network of alliances and partnerships. As I testified before the U.S. Senate last year, we face a security environment more complex and volatile than any that I've experienced. Today, more than ever, diplomats and diplomacy matter, alliances and allies matter. Today, we live in an interconnected world of shared spaces, the oceans, the air, outer space, and now cyberspace. These spaces enable the free flow of goods, services, and ideas. They are the connective tissue that binds together the global economy and, importantly, the civil society. From the seabed to outer space, access to these thoroughfares is at risk in the 21st century. Sovereignty itself has become a pawn in the new great game. President Reagan once said that we cannot play innocence abroad in a world that's not innocent. This statement is as true today as it was in 1941, on the 25th of June, 1950, when North Korea invaded the South, throughout the first Cold War, on 9/11, on the 24th of February 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, and on the 7th of October 2023, when Hamas attacked Israel. The world remains a dangerous place. The unipolar moment following the end of the first Cold War is over. In this multipolar world, national borders and economic sovereignty are no longer givens. System-wide shocks, such as climate change, the pandemic, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and Iran's unleashing of its proxies have disrupted global order. By the way, I'll just note that Reagan set out to win the first Cold War, not to reach an accommodation with the Soviets. The U.S. has enduring interests in the Indo-Pacific, a region at a precarious crossroad where tangible opportunity meets significant challenge. So while our opportunities remain abundant, the path ahead is burdened by several considerable challenges, including an aggressive North Korea, a revisionist China, a revanchist Russia, and now a dangerous and growing alignment between these three countries and Iran. In fact, since the beginning of this century, the global situation has worsened in almost every geostrategic measure. Consider that Taiwan is under siege. As Israel finds itself fighting once again for its very existence. Ukraine is ablaze, Europe is under threat, and Iran is trying its best to develop a nuclear weapon. Consider that North Korea is testing nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them globally and especially to our shores. Consider that Russia is attempting to realize its fantasy of returning to what it views as a glorious imperial past. And consider that China not only claims the entirety of the South China Sea and is increasingly willing to use force to exert its claims there, it's turned weaponization of debt into a national strategy. What's happening in the South China Sea has been called, quote, the most dangerous conflict no one is talking about, unquote. Despite the 2016 International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea, which ruled that China's 9-line claim has no basis in law, China continues its preposterous claims to the contrary and is now taking concrete actions to underscore its position by altering facts on the ground. We see this play out daily in clashes with the Philippine Coast Guard. Now, I needn't remind this audience that the Philippines is a treaty ally of the U.S. China is playing a dangerous game here as it tries to drive the Philippines from Manila's own EEZ, or Exclusive Economic Zone. The Philippines is not alone, though, in feeling territorial pressures from China. So too are Japan, India, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Vietnam. So too is South Korea, as China turns its attention to the Yellow Sea or West Sea to encroach into the Provisional Measure Zone, or PMZ, disregarding the 2001 agreement between Beijing and Seoul. Washington-based publication 1945 rightly asks if we are, quote, seeing South China Sea 2.0, unquote, in the West Sea. So when I commanded U.S. PACOM, I began to think broadly about commerce and trade, especially with China becoming a more aggressive, more belligerent, more capable, and frankly, a more coercive economic force. because of how interconnected we are, I believe that robust trade and investment are necessary conditions for global prosperity and security. But we're not just in a trade war with China. As Matt Pottinger recently wrote, we're in a battle for the 21st century. Folks, I believe that President Trump recognizes that the United States is a Pacific power and a Pacific nation, and that the U.S. faces one of the most dangerous strategic environments in our nation's history, including a vulnerable homeland, China's unprecedented military buildup, and the direct threat that it poses to our security and economy, and a range of other persistent threats, including Russia, Iran, North Korea, and terrorist organizations. Now, I haven't seen the administration's interim national defense strategic guidance because it's classified. However, according to the Office of the Secretary of Defense, well, Secretary of War, this guidance prioritizes defense of the homeland, emphasizes the centrality of the China challenge, reorients the U.S. military away from Europe and toward the Indo-Pacific, and calls for increased burden sharing from our allies. Now, since I was the U.S. ambassador to South Korea, let me spend just a few minutes on the U.S.-South Korea alliance. I've visited Korea twice this year already. Congratulations to new President Lee Jae-myung on winning the presidency in June. Despite some pre-election drama, we saw free and open elections and a peaceful assumption of power. This demonstrated to me the fundamental strength of Korean democracy. Last month's summit in Washington between President Lee and President Trump went extremely well, in my opinion. According to CIS's own Henry Haggard, quote, President Lee emphasized the importance of the alliance, underscored the need for continued cooperation against China, and highlighted the shared goal of denuclearizing North Korea, unquote. Folks, the U.S.-South Korea alliance, 72 years strong this year, was forged during a devastating conflict and has stood the test of time. It's mind-boggling to consider how much has changed in the world in general, Northeast Asia in particular, and the Korean Peninsula especially, since 1953. Some changes have been for the better, such as South Korea's miraculous growth into an economic and cultural powerhouse, a vibrant democracy, a high-tech innovation nation, and now a world-class weapons builder. Other changes, though, have been for the worse. Why is North Korea so far away and Northeast Asia a challenge for the entire world? The answer is simple. Kim Jong-un's missiles point in every direction. North Korea is ruled by a brutal dictator who values power and prosperity over the welfare, who values power over the prosperity and welfare of his own people. The North's unrelenting pursuit of nuclear weapons, the means to deliver them, and its unmitigated aggression towards America and South Korea should concern us all. Now, I've long believed that KGU wants four things: sanctions relief, to keep his nukes, to split the alliance, and to dominate the peninsula. KGU stated unequivocally that he'd never give up his nukes, and that North Korea's status as a nuclear weapons state is irreversible. By declaring the North would no longer seek peaceful reunification with the South, he abandoned a foundational doctrine of the communist regime. And now, KGU is trading troops and low-cost weapons for advanced Russian technology. Why am I not surprised? None of this sounds to me like he's going to get rid of his nuclear ambitions anytime soon. In fact, he's telling us precisely the opposite. Let's not sugarcoat his words. Let's take them at face value. The American poet Maya Angelou once said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Ladies and gentlemen, time and time again, KGU has shown us who he is, and shame on us if we fail to believe it. Now, while I believe that he'll never give up his nuclear weapons program, I have been wrong before. I can and do hope that diplomacy with North Korea would be successful. However, I recognize that hope alone is not an effective course of action. The quest for dialogue with the North must never be made at the expense of the ability to respond to threats from the North. Dialogue and military readiness must go hand in hand. Idealism must be rooted in realism. Now, folks, I'd like to spend some time talking about Japan, the Quad, the AUKUS, Ukraine, Taiwan, Iran, and its proxies, but my time is limited. So let me close with this observation. All the things that I've just talked about spell opportunity for South Korea and American industry. How do you spell opportunity? I spell it shipbuilding, advanced airborne fighter intelligence and early warning systems, space, cyber, chips, and missile defense, especially hypersonics. If the U.S. is to meet the congressionally mandated goal of a 355-ship Navy, or the Navy's own 2015 shipbuilding plan of 381 manned and 134 unmanned battle force ships, I believe that capable international shipbuilders like South Korea must be part of the solution. Make America shipbuilding great again, indeed. Getting the U.S. Korea Reciprocal Defense Procurement MOU signed is also very important and would send a powerful signal to our adversaries that this alliance is much more than just troops on the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, a strong industrial base in both the U.S. and South Korea benefits both countries. This is not a zero-sum game. As Washington and Seoul strengthen defense spending, modernize the alliance, we must expand defense industrial base cooperation and collaboration to ensure interoperability, resilience, and deterrence. So let us meet the great strategic challenges of the 21st century together. Kachikapshida, kamsamnida. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Harris, and thank you, Minister, for your very, very powerful remarks. Yours were a bit sobering, but also kind of you both reinforced the incredible power of the U.S. Republic of Korea partnership that has been going for so many years and in so many dimensions. So I'd like to start, your president, you both referred to the visit of President Lee, who was here at CSIS, actually, right after he was in the White House recently. And he was, again, talking about the Make America Shipbuilding Great Again agreement, and you both referred to that briefly in your remarks. So I'd love to get your thoughts more on how you see the opportunities with shipbuilding as a partnership between the U.S. and Korea going forward. So you want to start, Minister, with you?
Yes. As Ambassador Harris also mentioned, in the Indo-Pacific area right now, in order to have dominance in the naval power, we need to strengthen the naval force in this area. And within the United States, for its domestic power, it is very limited to build its ships within the short amount of time. Korea has the world-class capability to construct naval ships. And through our alliance with the U.S., we can enable this and we can satisfy the U.S. needs. This will be great opportunities. And since the Korean War, we've received a lot of support from the United States. And we can give it back to U.S. Strengthening U.S. naval power doesn't just mean U.S. military forces enhancement. It is also directly related to Korean security, and Indo-Pacific area's security is directly related to the global security. So we will tap into our capabilities to contribute to the situation and cooperate so that we can help the revival of the shipbuilding industry in the U.S. and naval power strengthening. And to materialize that, at the government-to-government level and business-to-business level, we have detailed cooperation projects ongoing, and we will keep pushing forward. And if we can do that, we will be able to materialize the Indo-Pacific strategy. And this MASCA project will become a centerpiece model in the ROK-U.S. alliance.
Yeah, thanks for the question. To back up to the summit, I think the summit went extremely well. Not only did both leaders appear to get along well, they achieved some important agreements and promises to do more. So I think the summit went very well for both countries and for the alliance. So I think that answers that. And I want to echo what the minister said about shipbuilding and how that could become a centerpiece example for industrial-based cooperation between countries, between allies. I visited Hanwha Aerospace earlier this year. That's the entity that bought the Philadelphia shipyard and a large stake in Austal. And they are all in. They are committed. We have some hurdles internal to our government to overcome, but because they now have a shipyard footprint in the United States, they are positioned well, I believe. Hyundai Shipbuilding is also looking at establishing a market and a capability and a position in the U.S. And so this is just indicative, I think, of the front of the wave of opportunities for Korean shipbuilders. World-class shipbuilding industry exists in Korea already, and we could use that to help in the United States, I believe.
That's great. Yeah, and President Lee, I think he went to the Philly shipyard after here. So we have this investment by Korean companies in the U.S. So there seems to be significant opportunities there. One of the questions we've gotten from Dong Hyung and with Yonhap News asked about, going a little further beyond the summit itself, but some of the practical things, Ambassador, that you brought out. There are some barriers some practical barriers to shipbuilding cooperation, that some talk about, such as the Jones Act and Title 10. Have we found, as the government's found a way through to address these issues?
Well, the Jones Act deals with merchant shipping, and there's another act, I can't remember the name of it, but it's an amendment that deals with warships. Mm-hmm. And they have a carve-out in there for national security. Okay. If the president certifies that. So there is a way out of it. But I believe that, more importantly, there are people in the administration and in Congress that recognizes the limitations of these laws and amendments. The Jones Act came out of the 1920s, I believe. And that we are in a new place now in the 21st century. And so they're working, I think, to figure out ways through this. But also, countries like South Korea and companies like Hanwha and Hyundai are buying factories, shipbuilding plants in the United States. Just as Austal did several years ago, as Fincantieri is doing now. And so, that's important too, because those are products that are made in the United States. So.
Minister, unless you have any comments on that, or?
Yes. As Ambassador Harris mentioned, if we want the cooperation between the two countries for shipbuilding, we have some legal barriers, such as Barnes-Tollefson Amendment, is one of the act. That's the U.S. domestic law. So for these barriers, we are working with U.S. Department of Navy and DoD, and in this afternoon, we will meet with one of the DoD high-level official, and also we will talk with the Department of Navy. So we need to think about this more progressively, and U.S. leadership needs to see this in a more progressively as well to resolve this issue in a short amount of time. Overall, Hanwha and Hyundai Heavy Industry and other Korean companies are very actively making effort for cooperation. And in reality, as we talked about Philly shipyard by Hanwha and et cetera, we need more than just one of these companies to overcome the barriers within the United States. So we are proposing a variety of measures to overcome this. So Korea has world-class shipbuilding parts, so we can provide that, and we can manufacture the ships by block, and then we can assemble it in the U.S. And except for the combat systems, et cetera, we can at least make the ship so that it can sail. Then we can kind of skip the security sensitive issues at that time. And U.S. can do the system integration itself. Or we can completely build a ship in Korea and just send it to the U.S. To make a ship, we need time to build the infrastructure related to that. So for these options proposed by the U.S., U.S. Needs to work on those, how to cooperate and coordinate with the U.S. But as I mentioned earlier, we need to get those legal barriers taken away, and we will need some high-level decision-making to have that happen. And we will keep continuing to talk about it with the U.S., and we don't have a lot of time, so we need to make a quick decision.
That's great to hear. It's great to hear you're meeting with Navy officials. And one of the things that's really impressed me is about the current administration and the Korean government is they're really leaning forward, not just talking about these issues, but actually working through the practical problems. What are some of the legal challenges? What are some of the cultural challenges, and addressing them? So that's tremendous to hear. And the investment by Korean companies has been significant, and look forward to that, more of that. I wonder if we could shift a little bit and talk about what you brought up in your remarks, Minister, in the Indo-Pacific theater, or in Northeast Asia, where outside of Korea, you mentioned the regional sustainment framework, which is an idea of the challenge of significant supply lines from the United States to the Indo-Pacific theater, has led to discussions between the U.S. and partners such as Korea in that region to say, how could we sustain forces in the event of national security needs? There seems to be lots of opportunities there for shipbuilding, what you had mentioned, MRO, or maintenance, repair, and overhaul, as well as some repair and overhaul, not just ships, but of aircraft and the like. So I'm wondering if how are those discussions going, and where do you see opportunities for Korean and U.S. industry? Yeah, sure.
Well, currently we are doing some MRO initiated. This year, there were 2 MRO projects on U.S. vessels completed, and 2 are in progress. And recently, I was in the United States. I talked with DoD. So we talked about let's not just stop at vessels. Maybe we can also do aircraft and also ground equipment for helicopters as well. We discussed that. And also for F-16, it's used both by Korean and U.S. forces, so we can do that as well. And also there are U.S. equipments in Korea and Japan that we do have some maintenance capabilities for that. So maybe we can continuously expand the MRO on such area. Then, from U.S. perspective, rather than coming back to the United States for maintenance. There can be time saving, cost saving, and also in terms of the readiness, there's a great contribution potential. So like I said, RSF is very important. Well, now with U.S. capabilities only, it is impossible to cover all of that. So with allies and partners, and leveraging the capabilities that the allies and partners have, we can combine them together so that we can customize that to the U.S. needs. I think that's very important. And also, to this end, RDPA should be signed soon as possible. So ultimately, RSF or RDPA, when they are all established, I think that will be for U.S. and also Korea, as well as maybe Japan, like the friendly countries. We can leverage the capabilities of these countries as much as possible. And when we can combine all those capabilities together, the allies and partners will be able to also contribute to the national security overall. So I think such cooperation should be reinforced going forward.
And to add to that, I did, as I mentioned, visit Hanwha earlier this year, and they are serious about their approach to developing a greater and expanded MRO capability to help the United States overseas. But the biggest, clearly one of the biggest challenges that faces the Indo-PACOM commander is this concept of contested logistics across the vast distances across the Pacific in the case of a future conflict somewhere in Asia. So MRO is part of that, and all the rest.
One of the things you alluded to, you specifically mentioned, Minister, was the importance of kind of partnerships across the region in areas such as MRO or shipbuilding or other kind of addressing contested logistics. And one of that was sort of the motivation behind establishing the regional security framework, the RSF, but also the Pacific, the Partnership for Indo-Pacific Industrial Resilience, or PIPER. This set of bilateral kind of or umbrella of agreement or statement of principles has been established to help accelerate kind of the development and deployment of capabilities. How have you seen? It seems like your remarks overall underscored that the need for more of that kind of partnership going forward. Bilateral is critical, but it's also kind of working across the region. So, any thoughts on that?
사실은 이제 미국
Well, actually, Korea and U.S. one-on-one, this bilateral cooperation is of course important, but Korea doesn't have everything that U.S. needs. So like Japan, Singapore, or other countries, neighboring countries, their capabilities can be shared as well. And there should be a system that can combine and coordinate such capabilities. I think the initiation point for that can be PIPER. And also in the end, it's about how we can leverage the strength of each country. And to do that, we need to share the knowledge, and we also need to have policy, institutional backbone for that as well. I think this part is under discussion. Well, anyway, North Korea, Russia, or China, having this close cooperation, just like that, in Atlantic, as well as in the Indo-Pacific area, centering around U.S., also NATO, and other countries like Korea. We all need to have close cooperation in order to be able to have the readiness to respond to such threats. So bilateral allies partnership is important, but multilateral ones are also now getting more important. And it's very important to see how we are going to be able to leverage and combine the capabilities of these partners. I think maybe the U.S. needs to take the lead in leveraging those capabilities, sharing them, and establishing the foundation to have policy, institutional foundation to have those policies together. So I think that's where the United States needs to take the lead in strengthening the cooperation. If that happens, I think we will be able to have more readiness toward the potential risk in the Indo-Pacific area.
Of upheaval, China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran could actually drive us toward greater defense cooperation across all sectors amongst allies and partners. And especially when you consider the common weapon systems that are deployed globally, not only in the Indo-Pacific, but also in Europe. The JSF, the F-35, the P-8 Poseidon aircraft, the Aegis weapon systems, and many other high-end warfighting systems. It makes sense that we have a regional approach to MRO and not a bilateral, even a one-on-one approach. Because of all the common systems that are being fielded, primarily American in origin, but because that's where we are today. Things like Piper, things like Piper matter, and I think it resonates.
Yeah, you both discussed the RDPMLU, and I'll just take a step back for the audience. So the Reciprocal Defense Procurement Memorandum of Understanding is a bilateral agreement that there have been 28 countries that have established these agreements with the United States. And what they do is they enable U.S. industry and that foreign countries' industry to have a level playing field. It says that we recognize your procurement rules; they're fair, and it's a sign of mutual respect and cooperation, and it enables kind of that collaboration. We have 28 countries that have it now, and Korea's on the cusp of completing that. So, would get your thoughts on how do you see that playing out in the coming months?
Well, currently, if I give you just an overview, at the congressional level in the United States, I heard that there are some procedures to go through remaining. So when we go over that, I think the two countries will be able to sign RDPA in a short period of time. I don't think there will be a big challenge on that. If I add a little more to what I have talked about in my speech, well, as I talked about the MRO in the region, I talked about how that will reinforce the military readiness in the region. Well, as you see in Ukraine or in other wars, you can see that it's not really the military force that will decide the win or failure of the battle. Well, actually, what's more important is actually economic power. It's like all-out war, right? So in the Asia, Indo-Pacific region, well, maintaining the military readiness is the default that we need to have, but at the same time, we need to have the economic support for that. So not only the economic power of the United States, but also the economic power of the Indo-Pacific region countries. So maintaining their economic power is also very important in these regions. So this RDPA can be a tool to improve defense cooperation, but based on that, I hope we can have more economic cooperation in more areas so that we can have allies and partners, economies improve to reach certain level. Then I think we can have more containment power. So we should not stop just thinking about the military power. We also need to think about the more like economic power. And when we have the RDPA, I think we need to have more expanded horizon of thought on that.
The the ball is in our court to finish the final steps of the RDP MOU.
Okay.
So,
We talked a lot about shipbuilding, but another area you mentioned in your remarks, Minister, and you did as well, Ambassador, was around aircraft, or the such as the Air Force's collaborative combat aircraft, the unmanned systems that are being developed to support some of the, to help achieve kind of more affordable mass. Do you see, where do you see kind of opportunities for bilateral or regional cooperation with the area of either unmanned air systems or unmanned underwater systems?
well, there's no limit to the, there's no limit to the opportunities when you're talking unmanned. We see the example of what's going on in Ukraine and all the ingenuity and innovation that's happening there. We desperately need it, I believe, not only unmanned aircraft, but seaborne and undersea systems. I know the Navy is deeply involved with the U.S. defense industry on developing underwater systems as well as surface unmanned systems. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. If Korea has that capability and development, then we can learn from them as well. But this ought to be, in my view, allies working together to achieve a common end state here.
Mm-hmm. It's a real opportunity for Piper. Do you have any thoughts there, Minister?
Well, actually, like Ambassador Harris just mentioned, recently there was like drone, like there are new platforms different from existing platforms. We can see that they are playing the role of game changer in new battlefields. So not only the United States, but also many other countries are looking at AI, unmanned system, and so on. And we're seeing innovative efforts going on in those areas. Before coming here, I actually also met someone in LA, and also tomorrow I'm going to visit Palantir tomorrow. So because it is about how to leverage the capabilities that they have in the military area. So like in the ground or seaborne or airborne. We need to accelerate our efforts to establish such system to maximize our forces there. And that will, I think, be the decisive factor in win or failure in the battlefield. But like you know, U.S. does have the advanced technology and has made this such weapon system applying such advanced technology.
또 파트너들이
Then later on, when allies join in with the operation, U.S. will have an advanced systems, and partners and allies might end up having some sort of like more archaic system that will drive down the efficiency in their war fighting. So this advanced technologies of the United States might have been like transferred to allies and partners so that allies and partners can have a certain level of technologies and capabilities so that we are not driving down the overall level of quality of the combat or war fighting. So in terms of export control and all that, U.S. might think that having all this to yourself might be better. But if you're thinking about the overall the Pacific strategy and the overall picture, having your allies and partners have these capabilities will be very important for the United States as well. So manned and unmanned systems and other new weapon system development should be experiencing more cooperation, especially in the initial stage. U.S. should think about transferring technologies and cooperate with allies and partners as well. Koreas, which have a very good productiveness, we might be able to help produce these in a more efficient manner, and at one there or another, Korea will have its own independent manufacturing capability. So stronger Korea Korea's military strength will eventually contribute to the U.S., and it'll be helpful for the overall Indo-Pacific strategy as well.
Sort of kind of two threads of that, I think both really important. One is the kind of the ability to kind of technology, collaboration of technology, which is kind of gets at some of the technology transfer or export control issues, which obviously need attention. And the other one is sort of the advanced technologies, the Palantirs of the world, where a lot of that is kind of commercially oriented and the like. One of the questions that we got that relates to that is from Joel House with Integrated Solutions for Systems is, how do you see kind of machine learning and AI being kind of playing a role in some of this collaboration? Is that an area of big focus in Korean industry, and do you see collaboration there? And what potential do you see in the future?
Since I'm going to talk about why we need this new weapon system, I will say this. In the battle fighting field, we need to drive up the efficiency of war fighting. And what matters the most is the lives of the people, human rights. Especially, Korea has very low birth rate. So we have to cut down on our military force. Then with a very limited number of people, we still have to meet or carry out the missions. Then we will need this fourth industrial revolution sort of technologies in our battlefield. So we need this AI and new and innovative weapon system and adapted for the center of the military technology. And all these AI and models and computings and all these need to be already ready, but it's not. Right now, they're still emerging. And President Lee said that we are trying to be the number 3, one of the number 3 countries in the world in terms of AI and new technologies. In this aspect, especially for military aspect, U.S.'s prestigious companies need to cooperate, and that'll be very helpful for the Korean military. And with that help, we will be able to achieve our goal, the common goal, within the short amount of time. We already have an MOU with Anduril, and many of the Korean companies are cooperating with Anduril in a variety of different sectors. What this means is that Korean defense companies are cooperating with U.S. companies, but other Indo-Pacific countries can cooperate with the United States with this way. That will mean that we'll have better military readiness in the region, and we'll be able to enjoy more closer economic collaboration. That means we will be able to better deter this potential threats in the region.
I want to address, thank you very much, Minister, a question from one of my colleagues here, Tao Hong Chong from CSIS. He asks, as First Island chain partners form a collective defense strategy against rising Chinese security challenges, do you think it is possible to form a defense industrial cooperation and alliances between Taiwan and the Republic of Korea to promote capabilities and resilient logistic supports to regional partners? So, could Taiwan be potentially involved in Piper or informally in the region? And have you had any thoughts on that? Harry, you have any general?
Yeah, Taiwan, in my view, is a global force for good. They have a great capacity. TSMC chips is none like them. But whether other countries would support Taiwan being in a collective grouping, whether it's Piper or anything else, that's an individual decision that these countries will have to make, and far be it for me to suggest one way or the other in that regard.
Any thoughts, Minister?
Well, for me as well, just like Ambassador Harris said, I agree. Regarding Taiwan, how do we cooperate against the Chinese threats and etc.? I do not have much information to talk about it, or my position is very limited. So I think I agree with what Ambassador Harris said.
And then one more kind of practical question, and we're going to move to closing kind of statements. So Kwan Lee from Northrop Grumman asks, how do the Korean offset requirements to figure into the RDP MOU discussions?
Regarding offset trade, I'm sure most of the countries have the similar system. And from the U.S. perspective, this offset trade sort of works like a little bit of barrier for us and some of the other countries. So we've been asking for some changes to the offset system. And based on that request, we're trying to turn that into a means of cooperation, not just a barrier. So we are trying to think about how to work on this internally. If we can make this happen, defense industrial cooperation between the two countries will go one level higher. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you ought to ask the fellow whose place I took on the podium to answer that question. I'm not qualified to answer it.
Okay. Now, there's clearly a lot going on in the U.S. ROK relationship, and it's all to the good. I mean, we're having tremendous, industrial investment in the United States. There are tremendous U.S. interest in capabilities of shipbuilders and others in Korean industry. Lots of discussion around and action around the regional sustainment framework as well as Piper. But what I want to get your thoughts as we close here is, where do you see and where would you like to see the U.S. ROK industrial partnership go in the future? So, Minister, can we start with you?
Well, in fact, I can only talk about this defense cooperation, and I can only talk about that. So I think I should be focusing on that. But however, the U.S. trade volume with Korea and its economic size, we too need each other very desperately. So last time when President Lee was here for the summit, we talked about the tariff negotiation. We confirmed what we need from each other. And not just this tariff negotiation, but we need a relationship where we can support each other in terms of what the other party wants. Then we'll be able to enjoy industrial cooperation and prosperity for both countries. And the summit was successful, as everybody admitted. And as a follow-up and implementation sort of measures for the summit, we can keep working on the economic cooperation, just like we have a very strong military relationship between the two countries. And we can keep strengthening this relationship, and we're very optimistic about the future. And that's the way we need to go.
I'll just add to that and say that things like this conference are important, because it sort of sets the high tone for, at the ideological level, for collaboration downstream where it matters. I think we have to keep in mind when we work to improve our defense and industrial base cooperation that we keep interoperability in mind. We have to be interoperable. Our weapons systems, whether they're made by American manufacturers or Korean manufacturers or some combination, they have to be interoperable, because our forces are going to have to fight together against against the threat downstream. So we have to keep interoperability, I think, in mind. And things like this, I think, are instrumental and key to that.
I think that, yeah, the importance of that collaboration, and because ultimately, as the ambassador explicitly said, the U.S. Korea have gone to war together. We partner together. We operate together, and that is where the rubber meets the road in terms of national security. So the more we can collaborate on defense cooperation and economic cooperation is more to the better for our bilateral relationship, for our individual countries, and for the overall region. So I want to thank our keynote speakers, and please join me in thanking Ambassador Harris and the Minister for a wonderful So we have a break until 11:15. We'll have our panel. So there's coffee and pastries outside. Thanks again to our keynotes. Okay, well, welcome back, everyone. Again, I want to thank Minister Sook for wonderful remarks and discussion, and Ambassador Harris for our keynote session. And hope you all had a great break. And now we're going to move into our panel discussion. Again, for the translation devices, channel 2 is in English, channel 10 is in Korean. And then if you want to submit questions, the QR code is in both directions. And so now we're going to move to our panel discussion on how U.S. ROK industrial partnership and a reciprocal defense procurement MOU can support and enhance the Trump administration's strategic goals. And so we have a tremendous panel of U.S. and Korean officials to discuss these topics. And we're going to start with our good friend and longtime former colleague of mine, Mr. Mike Vaccaro, who's the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Defense Trade Controls. So what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce briefly each of the panelists, and then we'll start with opening remarks and then move into Q&A. So Mike oversees he's the DAS for Defense Trade Controls. He started there in 2024, and he is in charge of the ITAR. So all the problems with export control, it's all his fault, but he's going to fix it all. So, but anyway, so he's got a long history as in the senior executive service. Prior to being in the Department of State, he was in the Department of Defense, where he was the Director for International Cooperation, and even the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Industrial Base Policy. And then prior to that, where we worked in government together was when he was the Director of Office of Strategic Initiatives and Economic Security in the Department of Commerce, which has a big role in industrial base matters. And he had all the solutions for us in the Department of Defense at the time. So it's great to have Mike here, and it's a real honor, to be honest. And then so next to him is Dr. Kang Eun-ho, who is the former director of DAPA. He spent most of his career in DAPA. But is now as the director of the Defense Research Institute at Yongbuk National University. So he works with colleagues here, and he's got education here in the United States as well as Korea. He has an MPA from Duke University as well as from Yonsei Graduate School in Korea, and a BA in Public Administration from Yonsei University. Next to him is Mr. Keith Webster, who's the president of the Defense and Aerospace Council at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And he's been there for 7 years now, and where he's been working international cooperation industries for the cooperation activities for the aerospace and defense industry. And he has, many of you all will know him from his prior roles in government, where he did tremendous, his career in international defense cooperation, culminating as the Director of International Cooperation in the Pentagon. So he worked on a lot of the issues that, and we're trying to emulate his kind of level of success. And then finally, to his left is Captain, a Navy captain, incognito at the moment, Lee Sook, was captain in the Republic of Korea's Navy, and he went to the Korean Naval Academy, has a master's from the Korean Seoul National University, has had significant experience in the shipbuilding world, and he's the director for North American Cooperation at DAPA right now. So tremendous panel, and why don't we start to go left to right, if you don't mind. So Mike, I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry, for the introduction, and I'd like to extend my appreciation to CSIS and DAPA for hosting us and organizing this timely forum. I think this is at least the 3rd time in a row or 4th time that I've participated, so it's nice to be back, and it's great to share the stage with former Minister Kang, Keith, and Captain Lee, and you too, Jerry. And congratulations on your new role, too. And you got big shoes to fill there. Cynthia's sitting right out there, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. For those who haven't met me, I'm Mike Vaccaro, and as Jerry mentioned, I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for defense trade controls. So I am Mr. ITAR, but hopefully by the time I finish my remarks, everyone will realize I am not scary. So that's my goal. That's the test. And as Jerry highlighted, I've been working in this defense industrial base, defense trade space for over 25 years. First with Commerce, then with Defense, and now with the State Department. But my history with Korea goes back even further. So I worked in the private sector for 10 years before I joined government, and a lot of that time was working with Korean trade associations. So I know all your companies from way, way back. And one of the last groups I worked with, we used to share office space with CSIS. We were in 1800 K Street. So I have a long history both with Korea and with CSIS. So I feel like I'm coming home, though this building is much nicer than the old one. I wouldn't be joking to say, this is really exciting times to work in the defense trade space. The 3 executive orders that President Trump signed on April 9th, focusing on how to reform the defense trade processes, both our foreign military sales and direct commercial sales, how to accelerate our acquisition and contracting processes. And the third leg, was on the maritime industrial base, but important to the defense industrial base. I mean, the fact that this administration early on, within the first 100 days, tasked us to work and address all 3 legs of this stool, which are together a critical delivering capability to make sure we can deliver capabilities to our warfighters. And when I say our warfighters, I mean the United States, the ROK, and other forces around the world. That's really been a great charge, and it's something we've been seized with. It's a privilege to be here and highlight the enduring partnership between the United States and the Republic of Korea, especially as we navigate the challenges and opportunities of today's complex defense trade environment. Our collaboration on export controls remains vital to strengthen alliance security and supporting regional stability. In this rapidly evolving landscape, transparent dialogue and close coordination with our ROK counterparts are essential for advancing mutual interests in defense industry innovation and global competitiveness. And we're going to talk more about that. And I had a great privilege of visiting Seoul in July for the first inaugural Korea Defense Industry Day, and saw many of the people in the panel, the Minister Suk over there, and had a great opportunity to deliver one of the keynote addresses. As our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, said on his first day in office, he committed that everything we do at the State Department should make America safer, stronger, and more prosperous. And I'm happy to say today that defense industrial collaboration is integral to this vision and at the core of these principles. So I look forward to today's discussion on this panel.
Great. All right, thank you.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you, CSIS and DAPA, for allowing me to take part in this wonderful seminar as a panelist. Frankly, in 2014, I was a member of Korean chair in CSIS as a visiting researcher for 1 year. Basically, at the time, I designed this seminar firstly, and might be in 2015, January 31, with my real friend, Andrew Hunter, at that time. He is the director of Defense Industry Research Center in CSIS. We too organized the seminar firstly. After then, from 2015, the seminar became annual event. So after then, I eagerly want to take part in this seminar as a panelist. Today, I realized this dream. As a panelist, I will give my frank answer, but in keynote speaking time, current Defense Minister of Korea already said almost everything what I want to say. So basically, I do not have additional or another idea, but if possible, as a professor now, I'll give my personal answer frankly. Once again, thank you very much.
Certainly, certainly. Mr. Webster?
Yeah, so again, thank you for inviting me here, Jerry. It's good to be back in the building. As Jerry noted, I'll just put just a little bit more context or texture on my background. 32 years in the Pentagon International Political Military Policy, FMS, DCS International Cooperative Programs. Last 11 years, 6 as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for International, and then, as Jerry noted, the last 5 years appointed by Ash Carter and Frank Kendall as the Director of International Cooperation when it stood as a independent entity, which is not the case today. Retired in September of 2017, founded a defense company with the former Deputy Secretary of Defense Bob Work and others. It was a FOCI, mitigated entity of Hensoldt out of Germany. Joined the U.S. Chamber of Commerce during that period as well in February of 2018 as a lobbyist. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce is the oldest and largest lobbying organization in the United States. It is not the Commerce Department, so a lot of people get that confused. I am a registered lobbyist, and I founded the Defense and Aerospace lobbying practice in February of 2018, which I run to this day as president of that council. I'm also president of Federal Acquisition Council at the Chamber as well. 50% of my clients want help, advice specific to international business development and market share, and 50% are smaller companies that want domestic government relations support without having to set up a shop here in DC. So that's my background. I'm also part of a private equity group that's focused on the second and third tier suppliers, which are hugely stressed as we try to ramp up production here in the United States, which then leads to allied supply chains and the importance of allied supply chains as we ramp up. And the advantage of a reciprocal defense procurement MOU, if you haven't studied it, is that it enables the United States to consider what is produced with a nation under an RDP MOU as if it was domestically produced. So this is a significant workaround under the Buy America rules, especially as the United States administration over administration and with congressional support has increased the regulatory mandate for what is considered U.S. content and major defense equipment. So for a nation with an RDP MOU, legally, your product would fit in to that mandate of 60% or greater U.S. content and major defense equipment. So that is the advantage in the relationship. They do work. They've worked for a long time. What I'm finding is we're getting very thin on individuals, experts in the federal government who understand how RDP MOUs actually work and are implemented. That's where I'm able to help, along with my advisory board, which includes an attorney out of the Pentagon and State Department who's well-versed in this to help my clients navigate RDP MOUs. So I'm very happy to lend weight to this discussion. And again, it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Great. Captain Lee?
Yeah, thank you for your warm welcoming and introduction for me. So it is a truly honor for me to join this panel to discuss, to openly discuss regarding further Defense Industrial Corporation with the admirable panelists, absolutely including my former Minister of Kang. Yeah. So I will speak in Korean, and I appreciate for your understanding as I do so. 제가 작년
From last year, January, I'm working as the North American Cooperation Director. There was a lot of things happening from then until now with the United States. Between DAPA and DOD, there was a DICTIC, which is a cooperation channel. Well, from last year, because of the importance of defense cooperation, there's a lot of work to do. From the day I started this work, there was this RDPA work that was in progress, and also recently the hot issue is like shipbuilding cooperation. So, including that, many kinds of defense cooperation. So we do have a lot of work, but under the alliance, in terms of coming up with a strategy, I am very excited and I have very high expectation on that. Thank you.
Okay, great. So, Keith, you sort of laid out really well kind of what exactly an RDP MOU is, what it isn't. Given the level of cooperation historically between the U.S. and the Republic of Korea, it's a little surprising there hasn't been an RDP MOU already in place. So I'm just wondering kind of what it's sort of, your perspective respectively on, are we going to get there in terms of getting RDP MOU signed? How will that benefit the bilateral relationship going forward? So, Mike, do you have any reaction? I know you don't specifically work on the RDP MOU anymore, but.
Yeah, no, thanks. And, as the export control person here, I'm the key enabler of cooperation. I will say that, in my previous roles, I did have responsibilities looking at RDP agreements, both at the Pentagon and then at the Commerce Department. And I think your point that if you look at, I believe there are 29 countries today that the United States has RDP agreements with. I think that thinking of who are our major defense trade partners, Korea is one that is the big one that's missing right now. I will highlight that the key word there is reciprocal. All right. So what does that mean is when we have these arrangements with partners, we expect that our industry will be treated the same as their domestic industry is in competitions. So that's an area where I know there's been discussions in the past. Obviously, offset policy in Korea has been something that has been, I'll say, at least a challenge for U.S. industry historically. But again, from where the U.S. government stands, my colleagues at the Department of Defense are the lead for the RDP agreement in close cooperation with our White House and the other trade agencies. But I think your point taken that Korea is really one of the outstanding, if you're looking at our major trade partners, Korea is the one who's missing right now.
Mr. Kang, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah. Frankly, my English can endure just only for 2 or 3 minutes. So my English already gone. So I'll say in Korean. Please allow me.
Regarding RDP MOU, we've been discussing this for about 2 to 3 years now. So the fact that we've been talking about this for about 2 to 3 years is that RDP MOU will further enhance the bilateral relations between the two nations as a foundational sort of piece. In terms of defense cooperation, if you look at the bilateral relations, we can think about the 5 phases of development in this aspect. First phase is from about 1950s to 70s. That was when United States was unilaterally providing support to to South Korea. The weapon system was provided and offered cooperation to South Korea. Second phase was more for technology transfer and license production in South Korea. So that's the second phase. And third phase, around like late 80s and early 90s, we talked about joint production of parts and assembly in South Korea. That sort of thing happened. And for the phase 4, Korea, based on its technology, was able to foray into the global market, and U.S. was very supportive of that move, and we were able to create the market together. And now in 2020, we're moving into the phase 5 of this development. This phase 5 is focused on value chain, supply chain, and advanced technology and co-production thereof. And we're combining our strength so that we can secure better technologies and jointly promote the defense industry together. So this is the phase. The reason why RDPA is important is, first, if you misunderstand this, you can think that you're simply tapping into the other party's market more. That's a misunderstanding in my mind. So at this phase 5 of the development, and from the perspective of cooperation, it's not about getting more market share of the pies, rather we're building new markets together. And we are combining our strength in the defense industry so that we can move into the new areas and fill the gaps of each other. That's the phase 5 and sort of level up cooperation for both of us. And for that matter, we need to have this RDPA as a basic legal foundation. And for more detailed discussion for this matter, we need to have this level of cooperation beginning from the RDPA, and that's going to be a great starting point.
So I've been retired 8 years, and RDPMOU has been an issue for the 8 years I've been retired. And then the 5 years I was director of IC, RDPMOU was being negotiated and discussed with South Korea. So it has been at least, 13 years, if I did my math right. And I think it even predated me going into IC. So this has been a long discussed topic. And there are a number of reasons why it didn't really progress. Part of it is the reciprocity piece. And from the U.S. standpoint, you have to have legal reciprocity that is measurable. I would say that government on our side is not really super effective at auditing the issue of reciprocity, but there's more and more pressure to do so, to prove it. Congressional pressure on the issue of reciprocity. So that's number one. The good news is over these 13 to 20 years, South Korean defense industry has really expanded capability. So today's defense industrial capacity in South Korea is very different, and I mean that in a positive way, than it was 20 years ago. So there's greater opportunity to legally achieve reciprocity. So that's a big change, and that's good news. Offset policies are a couple of, the offset policy issue, I think, is, over the past couple of years, is the biggest challenge in the relationship. I'm not tracking that closely, but I understand South Korea is relooking at that. So there's that point as well. And from a U.S. perspective, both congressionally and any administration, what we do with an RDPMOU, if negotiated, concluded, is we basically circumvent Buy America and allow you and your industries to be treated as an American company, as an American producer, whether you're producing that product in South Korea or you're producing it here on American soil. So from the U.S. government perspective, it is a very generous opportunity, and is treated maybe a little imbalanced in that negotiation from a U.S. position of generosity, to be quite honest. We, if concluded, will treat your defense industrial production as if it is American industrial production. That is unique. That is a preeminent relationship issue, as was mentioned. It is a huge enabler for supply chains and ramping up production, which are critical at this time of crisis in the industrial base. So I do hope to see that we get there. It is up to the president, up to really the National Security Council to make that decision to move forward or not, based on the last administration's executive order. When I was in the building, the Secretary of Defense had the sole responsibility and authority to negotiate and conclude RDPMOUs. That's not the case today. It hasn't been the case for quite some time. Yeah, so you have to convince the administration this is a good thing. and I can't speak to that.
Gotcha. Captain?
예, 그 RDPA
For RDPA, as you can see from the term, reciprocity is the most important aspect. Rather than more competitive matter, we need to understand what's reciprocal aspects, and we need to have win-win result out of this. From early on last year, we're just about to have the conclusion of the negotiations. We have many fluctuations, ups and downs in the procedure, but in both countries' markets, labor unions and both countries' markets thought that they will have less opportunity to participate in their own countries. So we had to convince them that's not the case, and we need to fill the gap in terms of legal framework and foundation. And as of now, we have some sort of consensus in that aspect, and everybody has a general understanding as to what this is and what this is not. And as we talked about earlier, Korean defense industry capabilities have expanded significantly. So based on the reciprocity principle, we can fill the gap with each other. Right now, within the U.S., the manufacturing, especially shipbuilding, has weakened a lot. And Korea, who has a strength in that, we can provide equipment and parts. And if we have RDPA in place, this can be further enhanced. And that will lead to win-win results for both countries. And U.S. has some limitations in terms of offset in that aspect. But for the offset trade as well, for last year, we improved and reviewed a lot of it. And some of the stuff that we haven't gotten to, we already submitted how to upgrade and improve this. So we just need some decision made by the U.S. on these proposals and options. And NSC needs to review this as well, as was mentioned, and hope these steps can be addressed within a short amount of time so that we can move forward. Thank you.
I wonder if we could sort of combine this this discussion with the prior discussion, because there we talked a lot about shipbuilding, a lot about kind of some of the practical activities that are going on already, right? Both here in the U.S. with the investment of a number of Korean firms, as well as kind of government-to-government discussions around shipbuilding, maintenance, repair, and overhaul in Korea. How would an RDP MOU, how would that help these kind of collaborative activities? Anyone want to start?
예, 제가 먼저 말씀.
Okay, I'll go first. For these shipbuilding and other general aspects, without RDPA, as you know, BAA will kick in. And we have no price competitiveness once the Buy American Act. So with the MOU in place, that entry barrier will get lower. So one of the biggest problems of the U.S. shipbuilding, which is a supply chain for the parts and equipment suppliers, those are almost non-existent. But with the MOU in place, that will be addressed with the help of Korea. Especially, Korea has a lot of shipyards, and we have a very strong supply chain regarding parts and equipment. So that will be a great opportunity for both countries. Not just shipbuilding, but in terms of aero sort of matter. Korea's KAI is doing co-production on TF-50. So that aircraft will be used for training aircraft and other projects that U.S. is thinking of. Many of the parts for that is coming from Korea's KAI, but without RDPA, competitiveness will go down in that aspect. So with the RDPA concluded, we'll be able to revitalize the market regarding that aspect as well, I believe. So if I can add a little bit more to Captain Lee, Korea's core part competitiveness can be tapped into by the U.S. And if U.S. wants to do it, without the RDPA, although we might be able to do the cooperation, but you will have to pay more price. And the cooperation will be very limited. That's what I wanted to say.
The other thing is that many people are asking about the impact of RDPA. I think people are overscared by the potential disadvantage coming from RDPA. But like mentioned, already U.S. have RDPA with 29 countries. But Korea is one of the most closest ally to the United States, which is not understandable. And also, I think there's a lot of gap in the perception as well. Basically, there is a difference in terms of the institutions or laws of the two countries. I think because those are the laws intended to develop their own defense industries. Well, RDPA, I don't think it will remove all of such obstacles. However, it can overcome some major obstacles such as Buy America Act or other barriers can be overcome through that. And in addition to that, I think you don't need to be overscared with this, because even if you do have RDPA, it doesn't necessarily mean that all the institutions to protect the domestic industry is not going to be removed. So it's more about how you're going to apply this RDPA in a way to combine the strength of the two parties. If we can do that, I think that will be beneficial for both of our countries.
Captain Lee's assessment of the benefits and the risks if you don't have one. I totally agree. Maybe I'll just step back just to get a little sense, maybe from, I'll go a little bit export control, it kind of highlights some of the volume of trade issues. Again, one of my objective is you leave today's discussion and you'll say you've met Mr. Itar and he's not scary. But, often U.S. export controls and even Korean export controls can be viewed as barriers to cooperation. What I license under the ITAR, by definition, provides a critical military or intelligence advantage, right? We got to make sure it goes to authorized users for authorized purposes, because if it gets to a bad actor, it puts all our warfighters at risk, U.S., ROK, other allies and partners around the world. So that's why we do this. So our goals are that any country that has an advanced defense industrial base, like Korea, you need to have robust export controls that can enable the cooperation, not be a barrier. So during the last 3 years, my team reviewed almost 3,000 license applications for Korea. And we approved 82% of them. We returned without action 28%, and that means the applicant, the package wasn't complete or we needed additional information, so we had to resubmit it. And if you do that math, that equals 100%. Our team only denied 3 licenses to Korea over that 3-year period. And my recollection is they're not even related necessarily to our concern with Korea, but it may have been a program where you guys were pursuing another market. So again, I want to, just that number stands out. 82% we approved, return without action 28%, and that was generally because of the U.S. applicant may have had some challenges. We denied only 3 of almost 3,000. Our averaging processing time for those licenses was 39 days. So I know there's a lot of, again, that's an average, but I know there's a lot of concerns out there. It takes years to get a license from the State Department. The fact is our average is 39 days. There are certain transactions that do require congressional notification, and that time can take much longer. But that 39-day average does include those cases that require congressional notification. I don't have the ability of my IT system to stop the clock for something that goes to congressional notification. Put it in perspective, our global average during that time period was 43 days. So I think it's a good sign that licenses that are supporting Korean programs or with Korean partners are actually moving through the system faster. And the value of those transactions was almost $8 billion. So a lot. And again, I'm doing direct commercial sales, not the foreign military sales, where Korea would generally buy end items, you're usually buying through the FMS sale. And the types of licenses we process, a good chunk were electronics, engines, thinking about the aircraft that's been discussed already, and then other aircraft related. Those are the big sectors. So like I said earlier, I've been doing this 25 years. The first meeting I went to as a U.S. government employee was at the Commerce Department, but it was actually a meeting with Korean officials, DOD, Commerce, and industry, talking about the KT trainer program, right? So think about so I've been there and seen how our evolution, and had the pleasure of visiting Kai's facility again when I was there in July, and not only saw the T-50, but also the KF-21. And it just highlights how advanced our cooperation is right now. And I know there's opportunities, and spent a lot of time when I was in Korea recently too, talking shipbuilding and aircraft MRO too. So we're all about strengthening this cooperation. I will say though, that Korea is not unique in the world who wants to strengthen cooperation with U.S. industry and the U.S. government in these spaces. And we, the U.S. government, cannot compel U.S. industry to cooperate with a specific country. Korea and other partners have to make a business case. So what we're looking for is a win-win for industry on both sides, win-win for government clearly, but ultimately supporting our warfighter requirements. That's the space I'm working in. So, and again, I think that, from an export controls standpoint, I'm doing my best to be an enabler to that, and actually in cooperation with DAPA, talking tech security and re-export issues also. So I'll pause there.
Keith, any?
Yeah, just to kind of go back to the RDP MOU advantage, RDP advantage. Really, initially, I see shipbuilding in the issue of parts and components to augment U.S. shipbuilders, and then also the ability to achieve repair in theater with those same parts and components, thus meeting the Buy America mandates. I don't see in the short term a decision to offshore manufacture of end items, meaning a vessel, at this point. There's been some chatter on that. Who knows where that'll end up? At the moment, there's a lot of emphasis really on domestic manufacturing. So I think the initial advantage, 0 to 5 years, would be on components and parts, augmenting our supply chains and our ability to ramp up domestic production of end items. And RDP MOU covers not only end items being treated as U.S. material, but also those parts and components. So as our industries are required by law to comply, and by regulation to comply, I think we're now up to 65% of the major defense equipment as an end item, the components must equal to or greater than U.S. content. So that's a very restrictive, and it's a growing. I mean, there's some congressional interest in making it 100%, which is unreasonable. So I really think getting this in place, having your industries supporting our primes in shipbuilding helps them more easily meet these regulatory mandates under Buy America.
Mm-hmm. I think there's sort of one of the things we talked about, you bring it up, Keith, on the kind of the parts and components, but I think you also kind of teased it a little bit, Mike, in terms of in theater. So because there's developing an MRO capacity in theater requires kind of some of the manufacturing, but it also requires kind of export controls, right? So I wonder if we could talk a bit about, addressing RDP MOU will help with some of those barriers, but what are working through some of the export control, how is the current initiatives around export control reform and so on? AUKUS is an example of, does not apply to Korea, but it's the same general principle. How are these kind of being viewed and worked in the establishment of like the regional security sustainment framework and these other kind of initiatives that would kind of bring that practical nature of the to these efforts.
Yeah, no, so we were obviously with the regional STAMR framework and Piper and other initiatives, my team and our RSAC colleagues from STAID are supporting DOD in these discussions with Korea and a host of other countries. I know that the Navy has had some MRO work on ships done in Korea, and my understanding is the work, for what I've heard from my Navy colleagues, the quality was outstanding, and I think they were delivered ahead of schedule. To the best of my knowledge, we had no export control challenges being able to support that work. Now, again, when you're actually doing work with the Department of Defense and the Navy, I think a lot of times the ITAR is thought of as the source of all challenges, and it's not necessarily. There could be security requirements that you have to have, government furnished equipment and whatnot, and clearances. And so, from a licensing standpoint, just, the releasing of controlled technology or services, that's the role I would play. But there are other things that you need to think about that are associated with actually doing that work that our Navy colleagues and others have to address. So, but at least I'm confident right now that, our ability to be responsive, I'm not aware of any challenges that someone's not been able to do it because of a licensing issue.
Okay. Any comments?
우리 바카로 씨께서 먼저.
Like Mr. Baccaro just mentioned about that, you said that only 3 were rejected out of 3,000 cases. And also you said that it takes 39 days on average, which is lower than the global average. About that, as one of the Korean people representing the defense industry, I would like to extend my appreciation to that. But I hope there is no 3 rejection in going forward. Well, RDPA or RDPMOU, if we have that signed between our 2 countries about the parts and components that mentioned by Mr. Keith, or about like part and component cooperation, I think the significance lies in the fact that if there is no RDPA in terms of the price competitiveness, like the Korean components, when we are trying to have this cooperation, that will serve as an obstacle. But if we do have the RDPA, for example, in the Indo-Pacific Command, when we can have the vessels, we can have the MRO. When we have the completed product, I think that will be easier, It can be seen as Korean companies having access to the U.S. market, but it can be also seen as a contribution to improvement of the capability of the U.S. shipbuilding and others. And also, I think that through RDPA, it's not going to be just simple production cooperation. Going beyond that, we can have more joint development R&D in new technologies and new products going forward. So like the Korean capabilities in new technologies like semiconductor or batteries, basically, we cannot have the complete components. However, this technology can have contribution to the overall completed products. So for the finished product can be more effective, more efficient, and more price competitive because of such components. Then that will improve the overall military readiness of the United States, and also, so that's going to be a really win-win for both countries. I think I'm repeating myself on this, but this 5th generation cooperation perspective, where, well, in the past, it has been just filling the gap. However, going forward, we can have the direction of creating more areas of cooperation. And for that, I hope we can have RDPA as a minimum legal foundation for that. And in terms of that, maybe we can have more specific discussion on how we're going to cooperate in this regard as well. To add on that, in order to sign RDPA, there can be many ways to have cooperation. It can be like component supply, component production by Korea. And in order to do that, there are some concerns from both sides about security, actually. So about export control also, there can be some concerns. However, from Korea's perspective also, we do have an act on defense technology protection. So when we do that, we're trying to have a strict compliance on that, strict export control, and we're trying to block the possibility of transfer to third countries. So I understand your concerns, but I also want to let you know that we are prepared to prevent that. And there are so many things that we haven't tried yet. So I think as we go with our consultation going forward, there are so many things that we can coordinate with as we come to know about this knowledge, about what you are having concerns on. And in actually, like FMS or DCSA, we got many of the weapon systems from the United States. So as we have introduced and operated such systems, there was no single case of issues regarding this concerns because of the Act on Defense Technology Protection.
You want to add something, Keith? Or?
Okay. So the issue of R&D cooperation, research and development cooperation, is really separate from RDP. I mean, RDP is about production. But I think to the point, having an RDP just is another enabler in the sense of the relationship. But the R&D cooperation is achieved under other mechanisms going forward. So I just wanted to clarify that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the questions we've talked about, and this question comes from my former colleague at George Mason University, Dr. Joshua Park, is like how can each country avoid or minimize kind of the domestic negative factors and fears over lost jobs or that come up with sometimes when we talk about defense cooperation, in terms of like why are we doing this here and or why aren't we doing this in in Korea? So any reactions to that?
Maybe I'll start. I obviously I think it's very clear that this administration is very, very focused on strengthening manufacturing in the United States. Mm-hmm. Obviously America first, but not America alone. And I think the Hanwha investment in the United States and the Philly shipyard is a great example of, you get a partner who could potentially help modernize our facilities, bringing in, latest technology, highly skilled workers is really a model. So I think what we're looking at is, our goal today has to be accelerating the delivery of capabilities to our warfighter, right? And I think that's the spirit behind the 3 executive orders that the president signed on April 9th. And so I'm heavily involved in the approval process to making it easier for our industry to sell overseas, right? So either a direct commercial sale or foreign military sale. But the other executive orders on, the acquisition and contracting process, that's to help deliver capabilities quicker to our forces, but also foreign partners will benefit too. And then obviously, whether it's just a maritime defense industrial base or just defense industrial base writ large or industrial base writ large, we're looking at more and more how we can do more. So I will say, as you're looking at these international opportunities, if U.S. companies ask me, how to be successful, I think that, again, I alluded to a little bit earlier, it's got to be a win-for-win industry on both sides. It has to be a win-win for government, and it has to be linked to, supporting a warfighter requirement. But at the same time, I think that we got to be cognizant is that as we're exploring these other opportunities, or as industries exploring these opportunities, who to partner with, it has to be additive. So doing this work won't jeopardize any domestic existing supply chains or production lines. We don't want to risk deliveries, right? So what we got to be finding that sweet spot where we can work together to accelerate delivery. And I think there's cases out there that make sense. I think a good example is the GEM-T example in Europe, where you have, Germany working with, 6 or 7 other European partners, have a requirement for GEM-T missiles, something that we only sell FMS right now, we don't have in our inventory. Worked with NSPA at NATO, did the contracting. Our industry partner teamed with a European defense industry partner, and it makes sense to reestablish a line or establish a line in Europe. So I think that's a great example, and we need to find more examples like that. Looking at, what my mission set is right now and how I describe myself or my team's role to our new leaders, is, I processed 24,000 export licenses last year, worth $200 billion, that supported high-paying American jobs, strengthened our defense industrial base, and delivered capabilities to our allies and partners that we want them to have to help them assume more of the burden, right? That's what I'm doing. That's what I've always done, no matter where my role has really been. And that's kind of the key message. But again, it has to be looking for a win-win for industry and government. And they're out there, but it's not just, it's going to take some time to make sure we have a successful story to explain it.
저도 우리 박가로
Just like Mr. Vaccaro just mentioned, win-win really matters, and I agree with that. Also, regarding the negative perception, I can go into one detail. It's sort of like overrated negative expectation for the future that something hasn't happened. So through RDPA, they think that Korean companies will will overwhelm the U.S. defense market, which is not true. Then we can kind of think about it in more detail. With advanced technology, can Korean companies can come into the U.S. market using that technology? I don't think so. There are strengths for the Korean defense companies. Those are the gaps that cannot be filled by the U.S. companies. So losing jobs in the U.S. will be very minimal or even non-existent because of Korean companies foraying into the market. And for the RDPA in Korea, they are worried that we'll just lose our market to the U.S. companies. There's such concerns within South Korea, but if you look at it realistically, what we can cooperate with each other is about mid-level sort of technologies. That's the Korean market Korean companies can tap into, not the highest advanced technology level that U.S. has. Another cooperation sector would be core components or some parts. That's where Korean companies have strengths. So these can be combined. So for the final products made by Korean companies will overwhelm the U.S. market, I do not think so. Even with the RDPA, we have some strength in different areas. And a lot of the highest advanced technologies in the Korean market is imported from the U.S. So that's why Mr. Vaccaro is reviewing about 3,000 cases for the export license. And if we have that advanced technology, it'll actually be helpful for our defense industry. With the RDPA in place, that's not going to be undermined. It'll further enhanced, and we can tap into our strength further. And we will not be overwhelmed by the U.S. market or the vice versa for the U.S. market either. We have different strengths. What I would like to say is that as long as we have a proper structure for our win-win cooperation, each country will be able to enjoy price competitiveness and will be able to tap into new markets using these core components and new technologies. And amongst the general public, they'll be able to enjoy this more amicable sort of like cooperation positive opinions. So if you look further into the details regarding this negative perception, there's no real fear. It's just expectation or imagination.
I'm not speaking for the chamber or the administration by any means, but my personal view is first and foremost, we fail to focus on the crisis of the moment and the lack of readiness and lack of preparedness for a fight. A serious fight, whether it's Putin going beyond Ukraine, the Middle East falling apart, or something happening in Asia. We're not ready. And so where I'm concerned is we lack in the United States an honest narrative from our political establishment, whether congressional and or the administration, current or the prior administration, about the industrial crisis we're in today. We are not honest with ourselves domestically about the fragility of the supply chain to support our big industries and ramping up at the pace and speed that they are being told they need to do so. If it takes 5 years to produce an F-16 from contract award, there are reasons, and that isn't the timeline to be on a warfighter footing. Same with the Patriot missile system. We lost a sale in Europe recently, not because of anti-sentiment towards the U.S. and U.S. industry. It's because it's taking 5 years to deliver a Patriot system. And the European system is available in a much shorter timeline, theoretically. So readiness, providing capability to our warfighters in our alliance is priority number one, and yet we are not putting emphasis, at least in educating the American population, why this is such a serious situation. Having allied participation in the industrial base is not necessarily a bad thing. Having China in our industrial base is a bad thing. Okay, so that's pretty black and white. But I would argue that given the crisis in industrial capacity, our allies should be able to contribute to our collective urgency to produce at speed, period. And I think this is a campaign that is missing in the United States at the moment. We have operated under a continuing resolution for a year. And as I testified before Senate Armed Services Committee in the spring, when asked a question about CRs, it's a bad thing. It is not a wartime footing. And here we are, yesterday, the House dropped continuing resolution language with a list of anomalies to get us through to Thanksgiving in November, when we really need to pass a defense budget now. I think that's what's missing. Okay, sorry.
No, that's very fair.
예, 이어서 말씀.
Okay, then I would continue that theme. So let's go back to RDPA. So in Korea, we have KDC, similar to BAA, Korean Defense Capability, which is similar to Buy American Act. So these two can actually be exempted once we have RDPA in place. If we think about Korean market and US market is absolutely greater, but we can also export to third country, not just the US market with the RDPA. Then market size will grow exponentially. Recently, Korean-made weapon systems, we're trying to find a way to export to more countries, and it's expanding. So we have to really think about how to structure this cooperation model for the benefit of both sides. In recent days, although we'll talk about it more in the later session, unmanned systems of the United States is a hot buzzword. It's a strength of the U.S. And Korean manufacturing is a great strength in the bilateral relations. If we can combine these two and find a cooperation model, it'll generate a lot of opportunities for both of us. And earlier, we talked about changes in the global security picture, etc. And U.S. is contributing a lot to the global peace. And in that sense, operational sustainment or sustainability is important. In that sense, MRO supply chain should be more dispersed globally, focusing on the allies and partners with strength in that matter. So with that, U.S. will be able to have operational sustainability, and then that you will be able to better contribute to the global peace using that network. That's why RSF and Piper concepts are being led by the U.S. so that allies can participate in that concept.
Really thoughtful kind of interjections by each of you on this important point to really kind of build a campaign on kind of the win-win nature of this kind of industrial collaboration. We got a question from Yuna from Hanwha Ocean, getting into the practicalities of, with an RDP. How is it applied to like joint production of vessels, and specifically like, for joint production where you've got IP issues and so on, how does this kind of agreement help for the joint production efforts?
You want me to jump in on that? All right, first of all, my experience with RDP MOU activity is its componentry and/or end items. This is not about sharing intellectual property and tech data to co-produce, all right? That's handled under a cooperative agreement, a different legal framework. So this is about you producing a component that our American shipbuilding industry wants and can benefit from, buying it from you, and even though it's manufactured in South Korea, it's considered as part of that 65% of US content, all right? It's not about, the RDP MOU, in my experience, does not facilitate the sharing of technology and cooperative development and cooperative production. That's all handled under other legal frameworks.
Gotcha.
Okay?
키스 웨스터 씨 말씀에 저도
I fully agree with you. The question from Hana Oceans, going toward the vessel co-production, well, I think for that, RDPA will not resolve all the legal obstacles that's present now. And as we have covered in the Q&A from the Keynote, about the Johnson Act or the Tollefson Act, there are acts related to shipbuilding. Well, they were there from 1920s, 1930s, right? So that was for the overall American shipbuilding development, and also it was just for the Second World War to win in that battlefield. That's why those acts were introduced, and we do understand that, and we also agree with that, why they were introduced. However, such legal frameworks are weakening the U.S. shipbuilding industry ultimately. That is also true, so I think we need to recognize both. And I think in this regard, maybe from the U.S., there should be some institutional improvement. However, as we have discussion on RDPA, I want to say that in our bilateral cooperation, in order to have like more in-depth cooperation and in order to facilitate that, it is important to have institutional framework resolved or removed, such as the Buy America Act or others, then that will be very symbolic and that will facilitate more conversation between the two governments. And in that process, we can also remove other obstacles that are on our way. That's why I wanted to emphasize that we need to first resolve our first obstacle, and in that way, RDPA can be a good tool. Yeah, I fully agree with him as well. And also, like the joint production, like you said, there should be other legal issues to be resolved before RDPA. And also to be more competitive, then we need RDPA. And also, practically speaking, between the two countries in the cooperation in shipbuilding, there are many cooperation methods proposed. And also in terms of production, there can be some partial production in Korea, and that can be delivered to the United States, for example. Also in that process, RDP can play a very important role as well.
More specific question, and then we're going to do a wrap-up question at the end. Professor Jung Hoon Jun from the Jongbon University asks, RDP MOU clauses do not regulate offsets, and offsets that we discussed in the keynote have sort of been talked about as a barrier to getting this done. But, it points out that, there are some signatories that already have RDPU, that some countries that have RDP MOUs continue to maintain offset policies. So, is there really a requirement for that, for Korea to kind of change theirs to get this done?
Yeah. So the issue is achieving reciprocity. Now, I'm not tracking your particular case closely since I left the Pentagon 8 years ago. But my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Korea's offset policy as it relates to defense is pretty onerous from a U.S. industry perspective. And if that's the case, and U.S. industry and any administration, whether previous or current, says, well, that's going to be an impediment to achieving reciprocity, because it's supposed to be an open pipe both ways, then that is an impediment to concluding the agreement. Out of the 29 or so nations that have a reciprocal defense procurement MOU, they have offset policies, but those offset policies are not viewed as an impediment to achieving reciprocity. So you can benchmark against those nations' offset policies, and they're not all 100% consistent. That may be one approach, but it's the issue of reciprocity and impact.
Okay. And their reactions?
In the big picture, I think that RDPA doesn't necessarily mean that other tools such as like KBC, Korean Defense Capability institutions. I was one of the one who introduced that. Any country has institutional framework to protect their own industry, but RDP doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to remove all of such institutions, and also offset as well. It's a separate system, so RDP doesn't mean that it will remove that. However, and when you have the RDP as a way to improve reciprocity, maybe we can discuss that further, and also if it reinforces the cooperation between the two countries, if it's an impediment to that. And if U.S. industry's perspective is that compared to other signatories, if there are like disagreements with that, or if they feel that's an impediment, like our minister just mentioned, there are diverse options under consideration. I believe it's feasible. I don't think it's appropriate for me to give you a strong personal perspective on that. However, I think that the Korean, we have introduced that to improve our technology development, and it was pretty effective too. But now maybe if it's an impediment to closer cooperation between two countries, maybe we need to have put a lot of consideration on that, and also we need to maybe reflect much of the input from the United States. Maybe it's a good time for that. I will stop there with my personal perspective. And also because this KDC institution, also if we do have RDP, maybe we can have more open application of such that in developing that institution, if we do have RDP with the United States. So maybe we need to have more specific discussion on the details to make it not just an impediment, in order to make a more advanced and open channel between the two countries, so that we can have like production of such things and exporting to third countries, something like that. The reason I'm mentioning the fifth generation cooperation is because such a cooperation where we can have new ways of cooperation, and in that regard, maybe we can reduce such impediment as well. I think that's an optimal way of pursuing this. And also the offset part, as we have discussed this RDP, also there was many domestic discussion on that internally. And I think there are many ideas to improve and revise that. I think already in AmCham, together with our defense ministry, I think we did have some discussion on that for 3 times, I guess, and there was many positive response from that as well. So we already proposed many ideas to the United States, but we didn't get the response yet from the U.S.
Major points of consensus. One, we need more U.S. or Korean defense collaboration. Number 2, we need to do a better job of selling it in our respective countries, the benefits of this industrial collaboration. And number 3, we got to get the RDPOU done, is what it sounds like. But I want to kind of give you all each give a couple closing remarks on where do you think the relationship goes forward and how do we kind of achieve our final objectives. So I'm going to start with Captain Lee and work our way this way.
예, 그 앞에서 다 봤.
I already mentioned everything I wanted to say, but anyway, I think these 2 countries are very closely related already, and it's a matter of finding ways to cooperate further between the 2 countries. I think that the first step will be signing the RDPA, and that's my hope.
Again, appreciate the opportunity to sit here with you all. I think it was a very rich discussion. I think it was an educational discussion. I just hope that the 2 nations can figure it out and find a way to move forward such that our industries on both sides of the Pacific are able to provide capability to the warfighter at speed.
We have talked about possible ways of removing the impediment to our cooperation, including RDPA. I think basically it's about having a win-win cooperation. I think that's where we need to really focus on rather than focusing on the impediment. So I think I really like the discussion, and also I hope we can have more peaceful and more stable environment around the Korean Peninsula. I hope we can have such cooperation going forward. And that's why I was here, and I'm very satisfied with the discussion we had. One more thing I want to add is that when we have such cooperation, when we go into specifics, we need to really identify what are each other's real strengths so that we can coordinate and combine them very in a granular way, not just saying that, oh, we do have RDPA and we're going to have a cooperation system. We cannot guarantee there's not going to be any concerns or like conflicts in having the cooperation structure. So I think we need to have also good discussion on how the structure of cooperation is going to be. And in that regard, I hope, Mr. Vaccaro, when you looked at this 3,000, I hope there's 0 case rejected. Of course, Korea will also make efforts to give you more confidence, but at the same time, I hope the United States also have more like trust in Korea and confidence in Korea as well going forward.
We reject licenses like it's about 0.5% globally, so it's, you guys are right on target. No, but you see me once a year at this conference, but rest assured we are working on a regular basis, myself and my team, with DAPA and with Korean industry to help strengthen that international armaments cooperation, industry to industry and government to government. And again, if your Korean companies are in the room, and you're incorporating U.S. components and looking for international markets, encourage you to talk to DAPA, but also to talk to me and my team so we can help you navigate through the process if you need U.S. approval for that sale. We want you guys to be successful internationally. We want U.S. companies to be successfully internationally. I also want to stress the United States welcomes foreign investment in the United States. Han was obviously a big one. I had a privilege of meeting with many companies in Korea who said they were exploring that. That's one way to get around the Buy America Act also if you have operations in the United States. Just throw that out there. But again, I hope what you'll take away from today is, like I said at the beginning, you've met Mr. Itar, and I'm not scary. Thank you.
All right, I don't think we were scared, but I think we were very enriched by this discussion. I want to thank our panelists for their time and their very, very thoughtful remarks. I want to thank the audience, a tremendous crowd here, and virtually as well. Great questions. I think we've got, and I want to thank in particular for Mr. Kang and Andrew Hunter, who were there at the creation of this conference 10 years ago. And it's an honor to continue to carry the torch. And we look forward to future discussions on these issues and future progress. So thank you very much. And I also want to thank my team, the team from CSIS, Katie, and my team, and all those AV teams for great work here. Lunch is right next door, so help yourself. And then for those staying in the afternoon, we'll be moving on. But okay.